Butter Coffee Man is back. It is crazy to think about the fact that most people are way more productive whenever they work for someone else instead of working for themselves. And it's super easily explicable. You can think about it for 2 or 3 minutes and understand exactly why. Whenever working for ourselves, we don't have the motivation, we don't put enough hours, we don't work as much as when you work for someone else. And that's easy to explain. When working for someone else, you have no choice. It is do the work or say goodbye. It's you can slack off, you can find ways to move around the office, look busy and try to do those things. But even those things are crucial to really getting work done. Like you might be saying to yourself, you are actually not lying to the employer, you are lying to yourself. By seeming busy, your mind does not know the difference. You're still busy and you still do something. But when you're working for yourself, you want to be, we desire this state of 100% productivity and 100% output when we can't. It is impossible to have perfect output all the time. Sometimes your throat is not in the right place, it moved 2 blocks away. No, it's so hard to motivate yourself whenever you are working for yourself because you don't have a predefined schedule and your standard for work is so high that you would need to be in this perfect health, perfect state, perfect focus and productivity in order to do that work. So the work that you are doing is usually at the edge of your skill, as opposed to doing work for the employer, which is usually at 50% of your skill or 50% of your mental capacity. And that's one of the biggest determining factors of success in productivity, I mean. If you are constantly working at 100%, you are going to crash. You are going to not want to work that on that certain subjects. Conversely, if you are working on things that are too easy, you're not going to do them because you don't feel like they are up to par to what you can do, and you are feeling that you are wasting your time. So, even though the externals might be interesting if it's below your pay grade, let's say, but not in the sense you would make more than your pay grade. So that's the crazy part. You will get externally rewarded so much more if you were doing this, which is a low priority task, low, not priority, low um, effort and low requirement, low intelligence, low requirement tasks. If you would do them, you would get externally rewarded quite heavily. And yet you procrastinate on that because it's medi- medium work, it's mediocre work. And you're like, why would I do that? I have this capability of doing these amazing things and doing these amazing tasks that I'm good at and that I can put 100%. And that's the point. Whenever we work for someone else, we do not think of that. We deliver good products, good outputs, great outputs, sometimes better outputs than we do for ourselves just because of the numbers, the sheer numbers of of hours of work that we've put in. And we tend to do that so much more easily once we understand that the way to have this good output is to lower the standard and make ourselves accountable and obligate ourselves to work in, as in, I have no choice. I've done this and I have to do this every single day. There is no distraction, there is no nothing. And you might think that that sounds awful, and it does. But if you have a strategy to start, if you have a strategy to show your brain that there are lower standards, that you can output at lower standards, you can truly understand how to become more efficient, become more productive by just doing 50% of what you can. If you can show your brain that you can work even if when you are groggy, you are hungover, and you can still feel proud of that day, you can really have this experience of joy and happiness and relief that you don't need to be at 100% all the time. And the way you do that is in a few steps. First, let's find a way to lower your standard, to do something as a start for the task you have, to show your brain that it's not so hard. You can do that by doing 1 minute of work before the session of work, or 2 minutes of work, or two sessions of 1 minute of work, just to get yourself into it. Because most of the times, when you get yourself into it, you don't feel like you need 100%. But beforehand, just imagining the thing, you want to be at 100%, but you are not. So your brain is like, I'm not, right now, I'm not at 100%. But it takes 1 to 2 minutes to just get things open, to do anything. Don't really obligate yourself to do the big session after the 2 minutes. If you're not feeling it, if you're not really able to focus on that, you shouldn't do the work. But you can kind of game that idea by giving your brain something to work on that project that you can have as a win in the first 1 minute. What's the one thing that I have to do in 1 minute and I know I can do? Ask yourself this question and then go do it. And then stop after 1 minute, take a breather, take a sip of coffee, and then start again on 25 minutes or more of just working. There is a study that shows that you need 21 minutes in order to have focus on something, to after a distraction to get back to the focus. I don't really believe in that, but if it's, let's pretend it's true. It takes 21 minutes to get into the flow of the focus of the task. I've seen that usually after 20 minutes, I get way more lasered in. But that's only on tasks that I don't have a lot of competence in. If I've done that task 100 times, 200 times, then I don't even need to focus on it. And that's where you want to go, where you want to be. You can listen to a podcast, you can be at 50% and still get a great result. And that comes not from having, it's not the experience part. It is in part of that experience part, but what it is having a way to replicate the success. A recipe, let's say, knowing beforehand exactly what you're going to need and what you're going to do, and sitting back just for 1 minute, looking at the work and being like, okay, mapping out. You can even write it down. Mapping out exactly what you need to do. You can also do estimates of time. This was a very good, I was coaching someone to make courses, and I took a month, an entire month, and broke it down in order to for them to estimate. They were having so much pushback against estimating how much time it would take, because they knew immediately when they said, oh, it takes 4 hours. Their brain was like, okay, if it takes 4 hours, if I do 2 hours today, 2 hours tomorrow, I just finished that task. And it took less. Every time they gave estimates, they overestimated instead of underestimated. Just because we overestimate the effort it takes, especially when on tasks that we already know how to do. We underestimate on tasks that we don't know how to do, but we underestimate on tasks that we know how to do. And that's the first thing. Take your tasks, estimate all the time that you will be needed, add it all up, and see how in how much time you can finish that work. And this would be quite an interesting experience. You might be like, okay, it takes me 2 hours to do whatever task. And you're like, but I need to do it 20 times. 2 hours, 20 times. Oh, that's a week of work. Can I do it in a week of work? No, because I can only work this kind of work for 4 hours a day. Why? Because it's so demanding on certain parts of my brain or my body or whatever, my throat. You cannot ask yourself for more than what you can output in a day, especially if it's demanding work. Think of it as, if you do, most people can do about 2 hours of 100% focused work on one specific task. If you change task, then you can do another 1.5 hours on that other task. But you need to get to a point, have some recipes where you can make those 100% be at 60. Once you go 60 or below, 60, or the percentage here is your ability or need to focus on the task. And the way I usually put it is that if you can listen to a video or a podcast and almost understand everything while doing the work, then you are at 60%. Certain things are impossible. Like, for instance, now it would be impossible for me to listen to a podcast. I'm sure I can in the future, but right now it's impossible. So that means that I'm not at 100% in this skill of talking in front of the camera and coming up with a subject. But try to strive to understand and see if you can put a podcast on and work on your things. You can do it with music, it's easier, but podcast is better because it demands more attention. And see the work, see what happens when you start to listen to the podcast. Can you listen to the podcast? If you listen too much to the podcast, does your work suffer? So you get this easy way of estimating what your level is at the unconscious level. How many times do you really need to be at 100%? Because if it's the whole 2 hours of work, then you're going to be burnt after 2 hours. It's going to be, you're just going to be like, oh no, what's going on? I'm so tired. So that's one thing. Listen to music or podcasts, not for the reason that you might think, but for the test to understand what level of focus does this work need. And then you can usually, if you listen to it a bit and then 40 minutes in or 30 minutes in, you can just, it just either stops or you stop it, and you don't need the, because you understand what level of focus you have, you don't need the podcast, you don't need to listen on anything. Second point, in terms of focus, is that always get to this point where you have done that and broken down the system that you have in order to better make efficiency, to make the system and the whole protocol for success systematic. It's always better if you have like one task to do the same, find a way to do that task a few times, because that's, it's gonna ingrain this strategy, this way of getting into, whenever you have that task, of getting into a flow, or like not a flow, let's a mindset where you're like, I've already done this 5 times, I've already done this 50 times, 100 times. And the more times you have, the easier it becomes. Effort levels never stay consistent. The more experience you have, the more the effort level just drops down. You can artificially heighten it by matching your expertise and your experience with the effort level, but you shouldn't all the time. You should hit higher effort levels 100%, but just as a peak of your work, not because you need to be there in order to produce something. If you need to be at 100% all the time in order to produce, you are building yourself a prison in which you are only working or not working at all on your things. So that's one of the most important things. How can you produce amazing things with 60% effort? It's a more nuanced way of thinking of success and productivity. And one way that I found that really, really works is to dissect your workflows and notice where you spend most of the time, and assign emotions, how you feel about that task, that particular task. What do you feel about that particular task? And the more negative the emotion, the more you need to get rid of that task, because it's grueling. And even if it was short, it's bad. So either find ways to get rid of it, find ways to make it find ways to make it shorter. So the more you can eliminate those tasks and those things that are very emotionally draining, the more you can output. And you might ask yourself, how does that look? For me, it's editing. I don't like editing because it's boring. I know I can make it interesting, but it takes more time to make it interesting. It doesn't take less time. So the way I do it is I don't do anything anymore. I hired an editor, and the editing that I do is very simple. I just cut the beginning, the end, and then leave everything unedited, unfiltered. Is it good? Probably not. Is it enjoyable? Yes. Does it lead me to something that I want? Yes. So I don't need to do it anymore. Let's take, for instance, a different type of thing. I wanted to start a business a year and a half ago, and I'm at, for the last year and 5 months, I've been at 90% done with the whole thing. And now I'm at 98 and I haven't done it. Why? Because I think that the work is beneath me. Even though it has the opportunity to double my income, I think the work is beneath me. And there is another emotional component here. I'm afraid it might succeed. Yeah, I said it. I'm afraid it might change my life. And I don't know. I just have this weird feeling that I don't want to, even though I'm saying I want to be more successful, I felt this roadblock like 2 months in after I was dreaming of the success that I'm going to have with that project. I was like, okay, I'm going to feel bad about this if I have this success that I'm talking about, because it would solve all of my problems. And I was then thinking that if it would solve all of my problems, then I wouldn't do the things that I want to do, that I'm doing now because I need to solve my problems. But that's truly wrong, because the first the first successful business I started solved 90% of my problems in 4 months. 5 months, it's solved 90% of the problems that I had before. Did I stop the things that I was doing? Yes. Did I pick them back up? Of course. So I took a vacation, a 3 or 4 month vacation, and then I was back at the work. It was harder because I took the vacation and now I had different goals and now I had different problems. So I created more problems for myself. That's always what happens. Whenever you level up, you create better problems, but harder problems as well. So I'm also afraid of having better problems. Like I've gotten used to, in the last 3 years, I've gotten used to my problems and trying to solve them. And it's a cushy life, but I have this opportunity to change it, to get better problems, and to create a better life for myself. And I'm not taking it. So, yeah. It's also I'm sacrificing the dream and the ideas that I have in my head. That's the one of the worst things that can happen to you, for actually putting things out there. Whenever you have a dream, you have an idea, and you go and test it out into the world, you lose something out of that idea. You lose the illusion. You lose the dream. You're not able to dream anymore on that idea. So it's it stops a lot of people. This I've noticed it in my friends. They were always talking about, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do, and fantasizing. And I was like, don't talk to me until you've done it. Don't talk to me about that until you've done it. And most of them didn't talk to me about it again until they gave up. So maybe that makes me a bad friend. But I guess, yeah, it was the same with me. I didn't talk about Well, I was talking more than doing. And when I've achieved the things that I wanted to achieve and I've started to do the work I wanted to do, I stopped talking to people about it. I really did. I didn't care about talking about. Yeah, I talked about it, but I talked about metrics. I was like, I did this, and that. And I had this output, this output, this output. And people didn't even care. They don't, people don't care. And I don't know. I'm getting back at being emotional about the fact that I have so much output and yet I do not have enough success, which is probably entirely my fault. But then again, who knows? I'm only entitled to the work. I'm only entitled to my output and not to the success that comes from that output. So even if you have a lot of output, you are not entitled to the results. If you think you are entitled to the results, you will get bitter and anxious and unsatisfied because you are basing your success and your self image on the outside world and the results when you should base your self worth on the outputs that you can have. Even though today was a medium productivity day, I feel very tired because we get a passive, we get passively tired because of the passage of time. I did paint on the wall. I also bought this beautiful accent light. It's wonderful. I kind of like it. And it was very cheap. I was having doubts about it, but now that I've seen the footage with it, it's very nice to have an accent light just filling in the side of your face in different colors. And it just brings a bit of fun, let's say, into the videos. I bought it because yesterday I couldn't work for 4 hours while I didn't have electricity, and this might help me as a temporary solution. I was actually looking at some other things. I'm actually thinking of selling that huge light because it doesn't have a USB-C port. That would help me if the electricity went out because I could buy a 20 milliamp hours battery at 100 watts. It's quite cheap, I think quite cheap, 80 bucks. So that would help me to film even when I'm not, I don't have electricity because it happened 3 times in the span of a month. I don't know why. Maybe a panel is broken or a fuse. It's not in my house, it's the whole building. So that's kind of disappointing. And if that happens, I can use that light. I've already talked to someone to sell the light and an Apple Pencil that I bought a few days ago, like a week ago. And I think that's just about it because I'm very tired. I'm gonna have to edit 2 more videos and then render everything and go to sleep. Thank you for watching and see you tomorrow.